Okay, so since you all are the first ones here, I'm going to put you on the spot. I'm looking for someone to do a 2-minute nonviolent pep talk. So, who's ready to step up this morning? Get us wrapped up at the beginning of our call. It'll be in a couple of minutes. You don't have to go right now. But leaders and leaders of formation who at least need to tell people seminar. So, who's ready to give us 2 minutes of something exciting about nonviolence? Chris, you're doing your first. Doing your first 2-day orientation. Are you ready?
Yeah, I'm in.
All right, sweet. Thanks. Hello, Gail. You're backlit wonderfully, so we have you in silhouette. Is there any way to get a light?
It's the backlighting.
Oh, that's so much better.
Yes.
Okay.
So just some reminders before we start as such, which is if you haven't yet, please add yourself in the circle on the notes document that is in the chat line, or if you want me or Radia to just add you because it's too much problem, just tell us and we'll put you on there. Also, an invitation to take notes into that document as we move through the call. So I'm going to add some empty slides at the end. We're actually not going to use a whole bunch of those quotable quote slides, so I will just take a bunch out. And is there anybody who's really feeling note-taking, or a couple people who really just want to step up and say, I'll do that today?
I can do that. I've taken notes.
Last time it really happened organically, so that's fine.
Who's taking notes? Who did you say, Matt? Matt, who's taking notes?
I said, I'm looking for someone or a couple of people who would say that they would take notes during the call today into our notes document. Oh, Barb? Great. And if anyone else wants to chime in, oftentimes our conversations are so quick moving. If someone else wants to participate, it's an all access document. So at the end there of our quotes, I'm adding in some new slides.
Down at the bottom. Should I just go at the very end? Or should I also write comments on people's comments? We can talk about that. I can't understand your what?
Okay. I'm going to try to change my audio. I don't know if it's my audio that's having a problem, but.
There's a lot of background noise that I'm hearing. So.
Okay. I hope this is better. Marie suggested it may be time to start muting ourselves because we're got enough folks here that there's a lot of background noise, even if you don't think there's background noise, there might be some coming. And in the 520 phone number. I want to unmute you. You were muted, and find out who you are.
Hi, this is Ellen, and I'm wondering, well, I'm on the phone, of course, and I'm wondering how to mute myself.
Well, you could mute yourself just with however you do it in your
With the phone.
That could take care of it.
Oh,
That might be the
okay.
easiest.
I'll do that. Great, thank you.
Okay, great. Ellen, that way you can chime in when you want to, and we don't have to unmute you every now and then and ask you. Okay, so let's
That's
see.
perfect, thank you.
Is there anyone who hasn't taken a spot on the circle who'd like me or Radia to add you over there? Looks like Ellen will add you.
You're adding me to what?
The circle in the notes doc that was referred to, the notes document that was referred to in advance. Because
Okay.
we'll be using that circle for our opening go-around.
Okay, and if you would use the email is at Gmail.
Yeah, if you want to clarify your email or something, can we do that after the call? I just can't
Yeah,
take
of
that
course.
from you right now. Yeah,
Sure, yeah.
great, thanks. Okay. I'm looking for who's missing on the circle. Let's see. Oh, maybe it's David. There it is. That finishes it. All right. Okay, folks. So for those of you who can see the circle, we're going to do a check-in with one word of the energy that you're bringing to the call today. One word. So, and we're going to go in the order that's on the circle. And we'll just, let's see, we'll start with Anya. And Radia, if you could just watch the circle and unmute people, like the next couple people as we are going around so that we don't get slowed down too much.
Sure.
So we'll start with Tanya. And Ellen, since you're not seeing the screen, it's Tanya, then Chris, and then you. So, okay, Tanya, go for it.
Thanks.
One word, energy, bring it to the call today.
Frantic.
Frantic.
Toughness.
Toughness. Ellen, you're up.
Home.
Home. Radia.
It's me. I'm bringing positivity.
Excited.
Inspired. Joan May, that's you.
Okay. I'm feeling hopeful.
You took my word. I was going to say hopeful.
Scattered.
Say it again, Marie.
Scattered.
Scattered. David, you're up. Oh, go again.
Long term.
Long term. Barb,
The note thing.
try it again.
Distracted.
Distracted.
Because I'm setting up the.
Right? And then that brings us full circle. So we've got a strong group of frantic, distracted, some hopefuls, some tough and long-term, inspired, So welcome everybody. We bring whoever we are into the call today because that's who we bring into wherever we're leading. And so glad to have you here. Chris, it's over to you for our nonviolence pep talk for today's call. Fire us up.
All right. I will first remind everyone and the background. I am super excited and hopeful for the next few decades and couple centuries. The next few decades. But I think the nonviolence training and the nonviolence work is catching on in a wide variety of movements. And one thing we know is that none of these movements have ever really been powerful by themselves, but when they've formed coalitions. And I see nonviolence as one of the bridges that was going to tie in a lot of movements together for some real people power to really change the world. So that's my nonviolence pump up this morning.
All right, Chris. Thanks. Let's all give Chris some props, however you want to. A plus sign in the chat, or shake it up. So thanks, Chris, and excited that you've got your first 2-day coming up, or maybe it's already happened. So, all right, look forward to hearing about that. In terms of program, just notes about the program. The Facebook group is there for us to use if we want to use it. The email list is there. I think that everyone's getting things through that. I kind of followed up with people before this call because I'm not sure yet, but we're pretty much going to gravitate to the Facebook group and the email group alone as we move forward. And I wanted to ask first, if you would put in the chat box, for those of you who requested mentors, has this happened? Is it happening? Have you made plans? Whether you're the mentor or the mentee, just put in the chat box for a quick minute what's happening with that. All right. And in terms of buddy check-ins, we had asked that you check in at least once in some way by now. Has that happened? And if so, just like one sentence about the connection you made with your buddy. And just put that in the chat box also. Okay, great. So I'm seeing I'm about the mentoring, that there's a lot of that's still in the future. And the buddies, maybe also the same case in terms of at least what people are reporting so far. So great. Radia is going to move us into buddy pairs. We're doing our best to pair you with your buddy if you are on the call, and if you are both on the call, and if you're not, then you're going to get somebody else. So what we're asking you to share in just quick little 3-minute check-in with buddies is just where you're calling in from this morning and what stands out from these readings in light of your own work. This is going to be a very brief, like just what's on top for you. And if it's your first time with your buddy and you just want to talk about something else, that's also totally fine. It's going to be 3 minutes total. Radia is going to start them now.
All right, guys. Enjoy.
So is it the three of us?
That's right.
Okay.
All right.
Hi.
Okay, David, I was going to say you're muted. How are you guys?
Good. How are you?
I'm well. I'm doing well. How are your days starting off?
David, how are things going your way?
Very good. Thank you.
So your days. I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was going to ask David if he's calling from home.
Yes.
Nice. So how are your days starting off? It's about noon-ish here, so it's already been a long day. How are you guys?
Good. I'm calling from Ohio. It's about noon here too.
I saw a picture that you said it was maybe the worst night of parenting ever last night on Facebook.
Yeah.
Oh boy. Oh boy.
Man, 2-year-olds, they're so entitled.
Yeah.
It's good. It's good. We're at the beginning. We're starting our semester, so everybody's pretty crazy. And we had a long opening conversation from our president this morning. So yeah, everything's starting up for us here at Wilmington College.
Yes. So I'm just watching time so I can bring us all back when it's time.
Gail, do you want to try a little check-in?
Were you talking to me, Matt?
No, I was just saying, Gail, do you want to say how you're doing?
Oh, okay. Hi. Sorry, I missed that. I guess I'm okay. I'm still trying to figure out life after the job I was in for over 2 decades. But you know, I've been working with Mary Lou and a couple of others to set up a nonviolence training center in Chicago. And a couple of weeks ago, we did a session, and then it coincided with the 50th anniversary of the Marquette Park March, and we participated in that. And you know, evoked a lot of feelings from me about what it must have been like then, and some disappointments about the march as it was today, although also feeling good that it was a family affair and very multi-ethnic, and there was anything but rocks and bottles being thrown at people. So that's it.
Good. Okay, so I think it's time for us to come back large group. So I'm going to close this, and then everybody is going to join us back, and we'll continue on with the agenda. So I'll see you guys back.
See you.
Sounds good.
Radia, quick question.
Yeah.
Right now I'm spacing. Were you on last month's call for this?
Yes.
You were.
Mm-hmm.
So someone asked if you had been introduced, but as people regather, I'll just say a word about your role.
Oh, sure, sure.
Yeah. I thought that you had been here and been introduced last month, but you're still on the.
No worries.
Welcome back, everyone. Just a quick announcement as everyone comes back. Radia Shabazz has joined the staff of Honor Peace through our internship program, and she's working with our racial justice organizing and our nonviolence organizing efforts. A lot of that is web events like this one, and so as we move forward, she's going to be taking more and more responsibility for the setup and the follow-up, posting videos, and that kind of stuff. And so we will really welcome you, Radia, to the team, and thank you.
Absolutely, thank you.
Mary Lou, it is over to you for some sharing about women's experiences in the movement. You're on mute. Yeah, co-host again, Radia. I lost that somehow.
Oh, sure.
Okay, good morning, everyone. Well, I wanted to talk about Dorothy Cotton, but I will also say at the beginning, since I haven't met some of you, that I worked with David Jensen in the Chicago Civil Rights Movement back in the 60s. We were working with Martin Luther King's project in Chicago in those days. So there's some things around our own experience that might be interesting. But I want to talk about Dorothy Cotton because I was really excited to find her book recently. And so Dorothy came from a really poor family in North Carolina. And with the help of an English teacher who kind of took her under her wing, that she got to Shaw University. And then she ended up getting a job with the president of Shaw University in his house, living in his house. So she had some really important mentors that kind of propelled her along the way, eventually to getting a master's degree from Boston University. And while she was working and living in this, going to this Virginia state, the pastor of her church was very much involved in the movement, and he invited Dr. King to come and speak. And Dr. King was all excited about the pastor and said, would you come to Atlanta and work? And then he said, well, Dorothy, why don't you come and be my administrative assistant? So that's how she got connected to Martin Luther King. She really took on the citizenship education program, which was involving not just like how literacy training for voting, which was one version of it, but it really was a whole empowerment program. And it grew out of the work at Highlander Folk Center. She was part of that. She went to some of that. She met Septima Clark there. When she got to SCLC, Ella Baker was still the executive director. I understand you talked a little bit about her last week. So she connected with some of the other powerful women in the SCLC history, Septima Clark and Ella Baker being really two of the critical ones. And she mentions in her that this definitely was a pre-women's movement era. Nobody had very much consciousness about all of that at all. And one of the things she mentions in another part of her book is that for some Black women, the women's issues were not nearly as important as ending segregation. And I got the sense that that was sort of her own perspective, although I don't think she said that really explicitly. But there was definitely some mixed feelings around that amongst women who were involved in the movement. Some really saw the parallel with women being excluded from certain things. Dorothy herself was really the only woman that was for the entire history part of the SCLC executive team. So she was there. Ella Baker was there for a while. Septima Clark was there for a while. Dorothy Baker was there forever. For a very long time. So she had a really critical place and was accepted as a part of the team in ways that other women were more restless. I don't know that Septima Clark complained more about it than Dorothy Cotton did. So I don't know how they were treated differently, but it affected how the situation affected them differently. So I think that's enough for me to say. Questions, comments? We're going to talk about her work in a bit, but we have a little time to talk for asking questions about it.
You can go ahead and just unmute yourself if you'd like to make a comment and chime in.
Hi, it's Ellen, and I'm wondering, the biggest thing I was struck by in the reading from her was the issue of not being a victim, and I understand the title of the book is all about that. Did she ever talk about how she came to understand how not to be a victim?
You know, the sense that I have about her is that it was really her work at Highlander where she began to understand how to untangle that process. But I think also she had really important mentors who respected her as a young woman, and that seems to have made a big difference. Her mother died in a childbirth. Her father raised 4 daughters by himself, so she didn't have a lot of support from home, unlike Ella Baker, who grew up in a family that was very much a movement family. So anyway, that's one thought. Maybe someone else would like to add something else. I think that's an important question.
Well, it's an important answer. I mean, I really appreciate the answer because that says a lot. I hear that time and time again from people who have come from very, very difficult growing up circumstances, that the thing that made the difference was another person who believed in them.
Mm-hmm. I do think that's really critical. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I do too. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
We probably have time for one more comment or question, if there is one. Okay, so we're going to move to David. So really these two sections at the beginning of these calls are meant to ground us in women's experiences broader than just the reading and make connections to the Kingian Nonviolence curriculum as such. So how does the reading of the month connect to the curriculum in a formal way or conceptual way? So David, take it away.
Well, just 3 things to begin with. One is, right after Montgomery, Martin Luther King established a pattern that after major events or movements or campaigns, he would write a book that documented his experiences and what he learned from them and so on. And the major event that this was prompted by was the formation of SCLC after the Montgomery movement, and the formation of an organization that would reach across the country, especially the South, and have affiliates among churches and ministers and community groups and movement activists across the country to support the Southern movement. So that was the event and occasion that prompted this. The third thing is that, and he says this in the preface, that he was very reluctant to publish this book, Strength to Love, because it was sermons and it was presentations, and that it required some editing to change it from an oral audience experience to a reading audience experience. Now, he did so because what happened after the Montgomery movement was, and there were lots of discussions in Chicago among the staff in the 65, that he really didn't have to respond to every issue, but the media and people in the nation wanted him to respond to capital punishment, wanted him to respond to the issues of fear, all these important dimensions of the experience of the movement that didn't fit into the 6 principles or the 6 steps directly. And so he saw this, and other people saw, using these sermons, which is often referred to as a book of sermons, to address some of these other ancillary questions that were very much on people's mind. And so the breadth of the sermons that were selected were among, now you have to understand, Martin Luther King made an average of 2,000 presentations a year. And so picking which 12 or 13 or 14 sermons would be the most helpful and relevant was a challenging experience. The final point about looking at Strength to Love is when Bernard Lafayette and I were kind of codifying the material and our own experiences and reading his books in 1971 and 72, we were really struck by the very last chapter about Letter to American Christians, because the preface that Dr. King used, and I may have mentioned this in the past, was, "Forgive me if this is more Kingian than Paulinian." And so we remember that phrase, Kingian. And when we first, in the early to mid 80s, started using that phrase by many people, including members of the King family, to see this phrase. And finally, we had to simply say, the voice that first turned to this, Kingian, was Martin Luther King himself. Well, that closed the issue right there. It was Kingian nonviolence. And it was Kingian nonviolence because it really put the concept of nonviolence as the justice partner to peace interest. And that it was clear you couldn't have a nonviolent movement without being about justice or about peace. And you can't have peace without being about nonviolence and justice. So this book was not based on a specific campaign, but was really based on all of the kinds of issues that pop up normally after any successful movement, as Montgomery was. And they want a person in the leadership, like Martin Luther King, to address his thinking on all these issues. And he was careful to keep focus on what he was about and what the movement was about. But he did recognize and consented to adapt these sermons for this purpose, to address some of these important ancillary issues based on sermons he had prepared to address them.
Thanks, David. We can take one comment or question. The time is pretty short. I see Marie's got in the chat, the context of the book is really helpful. I wondered where this fit in the campaigns and strategy. If anybody else wants to add a comment in the chat or make a brief comment, we're quickly moving towards our small groups, but there's time for one voice. Thanks, David, and thanks, Mary Lou. I think that the context that the two of you are providing is really special and unique as a part of the content. So I'm grateful for it. So Radia is going to move us into small groups. And in the small group, each person is going to be invited to share one or more quote from either reading and comment on why it stayed with you or why it provoked you. And those of us on the teaching team will be mainly there just to listen, may make a comment, but the main focus is on space being there for the folks who are the participants in the seminar. So Chris said, too Christian-centric and most of it to be useful to my network, but still some powerful parts that apply outside the Christian framework. Yeah, definitely. Okay, so, and those of you who put quotes in the slides, you can use those, and other folks, you can just bring in your quotes when it's your turn. So when you get in the small group, appoint someone who will keep you moving. You're gonna have about 15 minutes, probably a little shorter, like 12 minutes in the small group. So make sure that particularly all the participants get a chance to, yeah. Go for it, Radia.
Awesome. All right, guys, enjoy.
Radia, would you make me co-host again? It seems like I lose that whenever I go in the breakout rooms. That way I can help with muting and stuff. Welcome back, everybody. Good to see you all. If you would, just put in the chat box something about your small group, just like one insight or one connection that you had in the small group. And we'll read those out. Some of those out, Radia, as they show up there.
All right, let's see here. So Matt says Chris brought a metaphor of social movements as forest fires. Really interesting. Tanya says, and using the metaphor of Healer Cotton diversified the kinds of people, especially women, who could actively participate in nonviolent responses and social change. Says, we all have to help in some way. Everyone can help with something. Touche. Joan May, nonviolence requires so much work, and the internal struggle to love oppressors to be transformative. Absolutely. Gail, learned from David that we could categorize Dr. King's work from the point of each of the 6 principles. Marie says, interesting to hear about the way the principles are represented in these sermons from Favorite. And Barb says, I'm cutting out. Can you all hear me? Okay, good.
Okay, great. Thanks, everyone, for bringing that back into the room, which provides a nice bridge. What's happening next is that we'll have a chunk of time to focus on Dorothy Cotton and then a chunk of time to focus on Dr. King. And really, as we were designing the agenda for this month, we wanted to keep the focus in these beginning conversations on questions and comments on the readings themselves. There's going to be some time for, this is the connection I made, but actually getting deep into what did they say, or what do you, talking in these first couple of comments. And we would love to hear everyone's voice at some point. A note of mindfulness that we've been trying out, especially speak up if and when you have a connection to what someone says, but even if you don't, you can come in, but let's try and make connections and build with each other. So what did you learn, or what is something that stood out to you, and what questions do you have following the readings of these chapters? Mary Lou just added the importance of the inner transformation in order to respond to others with love and compassion and healing, especially those others who are in opposition. So who'd like to first? Raise your hand. There's folks who know this, and that way we can call on you in turn or jump in. One of the things that stood out to me in the Dorothy Cotton was I knew about the citizenship education program before. I had not read this book, so I'd read in other stories about it, but it really stood out to me how these folks actually trained the women and men who were the grassroots civil rights movement. And it's kind of like highlights how when we call it Kingian nonviolence, like there are reasons that we call it Kingian nonviolence, but this is the leadership of an era, and it just, we have to say that all the time. And I really appreciated the anecdote in Dorothy Cotton about when Dr. King came to one of the trainings and was like, "You're not studying me enough." And she said, we made sure that didn't happen, you know, that it didn't seem like that's what was happening in the future. So it just, that's one of the things that stood out to me. How about others? Are you talking, David? Here, let me unmute you. Oh, Tanya says I was going to mention the same thing.
Yes, I've always thought the connection, the combined result of Highlander and the fact that Highlander was going to be taken over by Georgia and the state of Tennessee, and Highlander looked for a home for the citizenship education schools and thought that it would be better for the movement to transfer the Ford Foundation grant monies to SCLC to create a center in Dorchester, Georgia, to continue this work and move Septima Clark from Highlander to SCLC, and Dorothy Cotton as the director was one of the really important turning points. The second thing is that the combined programs between Highlander and Dorchester, and I think Dorothy Cotton could have emphasized this more, is that it trained 17,500 grassroots leaders. And these are the people that built the platform from which people like Martin Luther King spoke. They were the Fannie Lou Hamers, the Rosa Parks, the E.D. Nixons, the 17,500 people across 17 states who were part of the movement and building that platform. And it would not, Dr. King called them a ground crew. And that's what Dorchester was about. That's what Dorothy Cotton's work was so much involved in. And she was able to pick up that ball from Highlander, and Highlander was willing to pass it off with funding so that SCLC could help the program. And I just wanted to kind of emphasize that it's a good compliment to strength, because it's a good concrete example of development process.
Thanks, David, and welcome, Ann. That looks like your technical problems got resolved. Glad to have you. We're discussing Dorothy Cotton right now. Who else would like to make a comment? Let's hear from several more people. Don't be shy. Time is short.
I just had a quick comment. I was struck by and could relate to her difficulty with forgiveness. You know, that it's a very difficult and challenging thing to do. And, you know, I think it's, you know, it's ongoing.
Thanks, Gail. Who else? Including bring on in.
Really good. Oh, sorry. I was going to say, Gail, I think that's a really good point that you made about forgiveness. I think that's, I think it's partly human nature. It's just difficult, and especially in difficult situations. And I think as a person of color in these times, for sure, it's extremely difficult. And I think that for me, the saving grace, or the important thing to remember, is that it's a process, and we have to go through that process and through the different steps in order to reach that point of forgiveness. And so I just wanted to bring that to attention as well.
Thank you, Radia. Marie, are you unmuted and about to say something?
Yeah, I was just going to add on to this too, that, you know, one of the principles that's nonviolence is a way of life for courageous people. And I feel like she just really, with her, especially with her reflections on like forgiveness and kind of her own journeys to discovering what nonviolence really takes, she like shares that transformation where like it becomes less academic or strategic and becomes a way of life for her. And it was just really powerful to kind of see and like read her examples, and just through that begin a little bit to experience what that transformation could look like.
It's that idea of forgiveness is almost equated with the idea of letting go. The more you refuse to forgive, the more something has a hold on you. So she was talking about how she had all along been living for white people because of her hatred, because of her inability to forgive, and that consumed her to the point where she was not for herself. And it almost seems that this letting go, this forgiveness, then evolves into the agape love, a more universal goodwill for all human beings, that you've let go of your attachment to individuals, but have then moved out to a sphere where you can express this goodwill to your fellow humans.
I was just glad that they used Satyagraha just because of the program that Marie's dad created.
Marie, would you just say something about the program Barb's referring to?
One of the programs that I direct for On Earth Peace is called Agape Satyagraha Training for Youth in Conflict Transformation and Nonviolent Social Change. And these are some of the source texts. My dad was the original curriculum writer for it, and these are some of the source texts that he pulled from. So it's not surprising to me to discover those things in there, but it's different for me.
We're coming to a close on our time for Dorothy Cotton. Is there another comment or of someone whose voice we haven't heard yet who'd like to speak? I'm really appreciating the way people have been building on each other's comments and building the theme. Tanya, are you?
Yeah, I guess I've spoken, but I'm a little unclear about the historic timing still. I need to do my work. But the connection she had with Pastor Red and, the identification with the impoverished white poor in rural poor in her area, I think, connects with the broadening of Martin Luther King's vision of social transformation as well.
I think it's important to remember what Tanya just said, because it did influence the thinking when it came time to plan the Poor People's Campaign, that it had to be multiracial, multi-ethnic, multicultural experience for people. And that experience that Dorothy Cotton describes had a real impact on her and on the senior executive staff that lasted into the Poor People's Campaign. And so much so that had Martin Luther King not been assassinated in Memphis, he was scheduled to go on an 8-stop tour up through white Appalachia, speaking with white audience, poor people. But the assassination changed all that. But so that the metaphor and the symbolism of Dorothy Cotton's description is very significant and had a lasting impact on the thinking of other planners and staff people at the executive level in SCLC and the field staff and many others.
One little piece I might add to that is when we were working in Chicago in 1965 and 66, which was prior to the Poor People's Campaign, we worked with some people who were organizing Appalachian people who had moved to Chicago. Part of the tenant union process, we kind of considered them as part of the movement. Their successes were our successes. Window in the private stuff.
Chapters that were in the syllabus or anything from any on the text itself, or your making sense of the text, or questions or comments you want to make about the text. So what do you want to bring forward from Strength to Love?
Okay, so while everyone's thinking, it's a try to bring into the small group, and I was cut off, so that's why I'll start now. In chapter 11, chapter 4, Love and Action, in section 2 of it, and in my book, it's page 44. It's the paragraph that starts with, notice too how the truth of this text is revealed in race relations. Well, so often descriptions or race become personalized, like is she personally being racist or such. But in these two paragraphs, Dr. King actually describes the roots of and the maintenance of institutional racism and white supremacy in 2 paragraphs where every single sentence counts. It's just, I hadn't noticed it before in this way, but I just wanted to highlight those, and because I thought there are a lot of people who write books and books and theses about this, but he does this in racism, and he does it in 2 paragraphs.
Thanks, Joan.
I wanted to put that out as a context. One context.
Tanya asked what page again?
Page 44, but it easier to describe it as in chapter 4, you know, it's just the chapters are divided into little things. So it's Roman numeral 2 of chapter 4, because it's different according to the book. It's page 44.
I think an addition I have is page 42.
Okay.
Does the paragraph begin, so men conveniently twisted the insights of religion, science, and philosophy?
It's the paragraph before that, notice
Okay.
2. Yes.
Okay,
But those 2 together.
right.
Thanks. Does someone want to connect to that or bring in your own comment or question about the reading? Who's next? I can't hear you, Chris. Here, let me unmute you. Go for it.
The same chapter, I think, the next portion, the third portion, the very top. From all that I have attempted to say, it should now be apparent that sincerity and conscientiousness in themselves are not enough. History has proven that these noble virtues may degenerate into tragic vices. And so, like, I'm just thinking of, like, you can be really sincere, but you can sincerely be like a jerk. Like be sincere and pointing, like, it's like, oh, I'm being so sincere with you about pointing out all the things I don't like about, you know, whatever is going on in your life. And that's by itself, that's just like not really helpful to anyone. And so I just like how you need to combine them with other things, like, and so yeah, like, there is, like, these traits are not inherently, you know, virtuous. I like that.
Thanks, Chris. Who else? Time for a couple more comments or quotes or questions. Ellen, you want to come in? Haven't heard from you in a little while on the phone there.
Thanks. No comments at this time.
Okay.
Well, another important thing comes up a lot. This was page 46. I forget which chapter it was. We must not seek to defeat or humiliate the enemy, but to win the friendship and understanding. So, and this is evident through a lot of campaigns and other people's campaigns in the civil rights movement. Not necessarily trying, when you have a victory, you don't necessarily try to but like, it's more like, we all won, the world is a better place now, or possibly not even saying anything.
Yeah, I think that's really important, and it's so contrary to the way our culture operates with winners and losers, and we're all focused on winning and losing. So to actually say, no, that's not the point here. The point is to come together in a new place that's more just. Takes some letting go of what's all around us.
It's still a good time to raise questions or comments about the King text directly. And if you'd like to start making connections to this is how this applies to my own work, or prompts me or provokes me to think about what my work might be, we're kind of moving into an application phase.
So I guess in that, making that connection, I was struck by how much and have a failed as the sort of the ultimate failure of modernity, and the failure of and his, in Martin Luther King's sense, a morality to prevent science from taking such a Christian morality, a renewed his particular human ethic. But yeah, and related to my own work, I was surprised to see nuclear weapons in such full force in his conversation.
Well, it's interesting that you mention that, because I happen to be on the board of a group called Chicago Area Peace Action, which started in the 70s really against nuclear weapons. And what we did was we revisited Dr. King's speech Beyond Vietnam, and looking at sort of the three evils of militarism, racism, and poverty, and how he connected them. And we were thinking to ourselves that if he were around today, he would have probably added, climate change, or what we're doing to the environment, as a fourth thing. But that he saw the interconnections of all of these issues. So what we've decided is that we created a kind of visual issue cloud. And we put in the middle of it Dr. King's phrase, a radical revolution in values, because that kind of undergirds all all of these, and it makes it make sense that he would talk about nuclear weapons as well as racism, because that's what it's all about. It's a radical revolution in values.
How are you using that cloud, that word cloud, or what did it lead to?
What did it lead to? Well, that's interesting that you mentioned that. We had a big sort of board retreat, strategic planning, and we're preparing to do our annual dinner. And instead of being just, we sort of ping-ponged between militarism and climate change. And what we're trying to do more intentionally is incorporate, for this organization, talking about economic justice and racial justice. So we're looking at doing our annual dinner to have a speaker talk about some of the issues, to sort of interweave Black Lives Matter and violations like the We Charge Genocide campaigns with concerns about, because our dinner is going to be a week after the election. So what can activists around militarism and around economic justice and racial justice tell us about how we should be active under the, whoever becomes the president? So we're trying to be more deliberate and not just being about climate change.
There is a comment from Tanya responding to what you're saying, Gail. I've been working to connect the pieces of racial justice and nuclear disarmament here at my center, and this is a beautiful way to do so. Thanks, Gail.
Thank you.
Let's hear from a couple other people about connections that you make from the reading to your own work, or carrying a thread from what you're already hearing in this application conversation.
One thing that keeps striking me is just how these strategies could be used to support the LGBTQ, I always mess that up, anyway, community. Because that's in the whose house is on fire analogy, their house is also on fire now. Kind of like the poor whites. And that's what is battling around.
Thanks, Barb. Let's hear from a couple other folks. Oh, David, you're muted. I can unmute you. Oh, there, you found it.
I apologize. It's really interesting to raise that point, Barb, because a lot of pressure from the media and conservative Black ministers were asserted to try to discourage the involvement of Bayard Rustin, who was quite outspoken as a gay Quaker, an activist and tactician and strategist. And Dr. King refused to reject Bayard and continued to learn from him, and learned a great deal about nonviolence through Bayard's involvement. Because Bayard, Jim Farmer, and a number of others, Glenn Smiley, and so on, other FOR people, were connected to international nonviolent movements and were decades ahead in the strategy and tactics and theoretical sides of nonviolence. And Bayard was an important emissary of that, and Dr. King embraced him. And so there's two ways people learn from you: what you say and what you do. And by what he did, not only with Bayard about that issue, but with Jack O'Dell about the issue of red baiting and communist accusations, was a good example of how Martin Luther King and the movement tried to deal with these kinds of pressures.
Lou writes, would you read that, Radia?
Useful to know Reed Gill's discussion of the peace action work, that there is a plan to modernize nuclear weapons, spending $1 trillion on that in the next 30 years. This is money that would not be available for dealing with economic justice issues. Ground Zero outside Seattle, which is a protest group at the boundary of the local nuclear submarine base, is working on bringing this to public attention here. Interesting.
The Navy's continued use and expanded use of sonar is decimating population.
There's a lot of people. Yeah, there was a long-term nonviolent resistance to the extremely low frequency naval installations in northern Wisconsin and the upper peninsula of Michigan that were bases that communicated with nuclear submarines using sonar that just wreaked havoc with whales. So I was involved in that. We're into the last 10 minutes of our call. Is there another comment about how this is applying to your own work? Recognizing that people in the call are coming in it at very different places, and that's fine. So leading trainings, doing organizing, learning and reflecting, being provoked personally, all of these things are forms of application.
Speaking of us being all at different places, a lot of what our work in Direct Action Everywhere is trying to do is to show that direct action is not for, like, you know, rowdy punk kids. It's for people who care, and to try to point out that there's a lot of different ways you can help. So whatever your movement is, you know, there are ways you can help pretty much no matter what your situation is. Now, some people are in a situation where they can help a lot because of whatever privileges or situations they have, and other people may only be able to help a little because of other situations. But yeah, like one of the things I point out is, you know, my nieces, if anything happens to my parents, then I get custody of my nieces. And if I get custody of my nieces, I would have to change my activism. Because right now there's things that I'm willing to risk that I would not be willing to risk if I were their guardian. You know, because they would require me to come home safe at night. And right now, I'm not always sure I'm going to come home safe at night.
Yeah. Thanks.
Are we going in order of the pictures?
What, Barb?
I said, are we going in order of the screenshots?
We're not doing a go around right now. It's your turn if you want to take it.
Okay, I'll take it. So I'm going to Steve after this call and learn some ways that I can become more active, because right now I'm just gathering information.
Chris.
Yeah. Well.
So we're moving into our last few minutes, and what I'd like to do is ask you to go to your chat box, and I'm going to put in there 2 prompts. One is a theme, and the other is I will remember. And the theme is, what's a theme that you feel like has come up again and again in today's call that we just want to lift up and be conscious about? And the second is, 6 months from now, what do you want to remember from today's call? Something that happened inside you, an insight that you gained in a conversation, something. So add a theme and/or an I will remember. And just put theme and put it in. I will remember and put it in. And then we'll use those as the closing reading for our call today. So take a couple minutes to reflect.
Matt, can you hear me? Hello?
Oh, we hear you.
Okay. I don't know how to raise my hand. Well, sorry for the verbal intrusion.
No, it's good. What would you like me to add for your theme or your will remember?
Actually, I'm glad I spoke up because I haven't heard any of what has already been said.
It's in the chat box, so it hasn't been. So I'm just asking you if you want to share yours, and we'll put it in there and then read it out all together.
My theme is empowerment, and I will remember that it's an evolutionary process, and all levels and stages have a welcome place.
It's an evolutionary process, and all what?
All levels or stages are welcome.
Thanks.
Yes.
Okay, so these are adding in here. Several more have just been added. It'll take about 1 more minute just to write down your theme from the call or what you especially will remember. And would someone volunteer to read these out? Oh, Barb, great. I'll unmute you. Thanks.
Whoa. Okay. Sorry, I sent mine to Chris instead of everyone, and hopefully he can take it away. Okay. Let me go up here. That's okay because I can read it. I will remember that there are direct links between atomic weapons and civil rights that I can explore and highlight in my work. I will remember a diverse group of people coming together to teach and learn about forgiveness. Forgiveness, important to acknowledge the various emotions that come with the process so that we can fully reach the state of forgiveness. Forgiveness. Forgiving is self-healing. Interconnectedness as integral to the experience of nonviolence and social change. I will remember social movements are like forest fires. The spark itself is less important than the dense networks that are ready to catch fire. Challenges of true forgiveness, empowerment. Process of action. Thinking of Cotton and Highlander and citizenship schools goes with courage, coming from faith. I will remember it's an evolutionary process and all levels or stages are welcome. The inner work of nonviolence and especially forgiveness, and also the importance of, as Dr. King says, never lose infinite hope. Many of the women were committed to not being a victim anymore. I will remember that you can turn your other cheek by being your best self. I will remember thinking consciously about how King's insights fit into which of the 6 principles. While Dorothy Cotton powerfully illuminates the internal process and struggle to love and forgive in order to transform people and situations, Dr. King's chapters offer steps and examples that show us how to face fear, shattered dreams, and live out agape love in the context of systems of multiplisms. Many of the women were committed. Oh, whoops, that's it. That's it.
Yes, thank you very much, Barb. Everyone, we have reached the end of this call. We meet again on Wednesday, September 14th. Our reading for that assignment, for that call, is Martin Luther King's book, Why We Can't Wait, and Dorothy Cotton's chapter 12, which I think Tanya will be posting again. I think we eventually worked out that Google Drive access, or everyone got it who wanted it. So just be persistent if it doesn't seem like it's working. There's also a chapter from Coretta Scott King that'll be for next time. Turn on the hoses, damn it. And it's recommended reading for one story, Diane Nash's They're the Ones Who Got Scared. Are you uploading all of those, Tanya? Okay.
Yep.
Great. And I see some things happening maybe in the chat. Is that right? I watched the movie. Excellent. Great. Okay, so we'll see you all on September 14th. Anybody who wants to stick around for a little bit of debrief of the call, we're always tinkering to make these 90 minutes as productive as possible, so I'd be glad to hear your reflections. Otherwise, go in peace. Build justice. Adios.
Adios.
Okay, Matt, can you send Chris and I into a room?
Radia can do that.
Okay, Radia, would you do that for like, what, 5 minutes, Chris?
Sure.
Thank you.
Sure.
And I think you two can just hang up whenever you're done. Like, we can just put you in that room, and the rest of us can be debriefing here, unless you want to come back and debrief.
Is that okay? Are you okay with just ending it after that, Chris?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay.
All right, so I'm sending you guys now.
All right, thanks.
All right, bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Keep up the good work. All right, so it's the people who are left are Mary Lou, Joan May, David, Radia, and Ellen. And so let's try